The results are in for the 2024 election, and I believe it's time to move on from it. But I'm going to offer some of my thoughts on what had occurred on that night and how people are reacting to it on this episode of the Scho-Zone. All right, everybody, welcome to the Scho-Zone. It is your host, Ryan Schofield, coming at you from the Degen Center, as we call it. Everybody that's listening, like, subscribe, share, comment, like I say, all that douchebag stuff that podcast hosts say. Thank you for tuning in. If you are listening to this, well, obviously, if you are listening to this, you are listening to this. That's kind of a dumb thing for me to say, but I don't always do the best job of communicating, but I'm going to kind of step out of my comfort zone, which I think many people should try stepping out of their comfort zone from time to time. I never really wanted to get political on this show, mostly because it's so divisive and you can really turn people off to a certain thing. But I just kind of think that we need to be a little bit more open and transparent about certain things. And I'm not going to be really necessarily covering anything from the idea of, I don't really know what I'm going to go on with this one. I just wanted to kind of get out some thoughts to my reactions to this election because it was a really important. I mean, every election is important, but I think that this one was very, very important because we've never had it where people seem to be, and I say that seem to be so far apart. When after having some discussions with people that are not like myself, I should say, I don't think we're quite as far apart as we actually think we are. I use this comments a lot of the time, and I believe I used it on a episode earlier in describing. I was on the episode with Big Tone, and I was talking about how I just kind of have a little thing with Bill's Mafia, and I made the comment of, and I admission my own, errors, which I'm going to probably own to some errors in this. It's good. Nobody's perfect. That I had said we unfortunately judge groups by their worst members. A lot of what we had seen, or a lot of the things that we don't like about the two sides, I would kind of call it, of the election, are that we really just only judge people based on the most extreme members of the groups. Uh, on the left and on the right, I think that the way that I kind of break this down, and I'm just throwing numbers out there, but just to kind of illustrate a point, I think that you have 10% of people of both sides or affiliations, you want to call them, that are the extremes. And we kind of look at those as that we lump everybody into that group. You have your far left liberals, and then you have your raging conservatives. In between is 80% of us. I don't believe the gap between many of us is that far apart. In fact, I actually have had some conversations with some people where I found that to be very, very true, where the other 10% of people seem that they want to argue about everything, when in reality, we should be discussing things. And I looked at, with everybody, there was one post I saw from a degenerate gambler out there, Spanky, and he's not a degenerate. He's like one of the best gamblers out there. Spanky on Twitter, as he goes by, or I think that's his handle, but he's known as Spanky in the business. And he had said, hey, rather than waiting in line, find somebody that you are going to vote opposite of, and just you two should just leave. You're going to cancel each other out by not voting, and go out and have a discussion and start talking about why that you voted the way that you did. There were some people that were just very, very, one way or another. It happened to go one way. It could have gone the other way, obviously. We had people that instantly just dismissed. Like, I have people that would probably never want to be my friend again based on who I supported during the selection process. And that's fucked up just because of one thing. Now, everybody has an issue that is near and dear to their heart. If we were, I would say it would be a beautiful thing if we were only focused on one thing, but we have a lot of things we need to work on. Anyone that says that this place has never been, this is the best America's ever been, I don't know. I've only been alive for 39 years. And to me, I look at it as that's probably was the worst it's ever been, but that's just easy for me to say from my position. Somebody can have a different position, and I would actually be happy to discuss that, not argue it. That's kind of a big thing. To myself, as when I registered to vote, I'm a registered independent, believe it or not. I tend to find myself to be more on the moderate side of things, or as I've often joked around, is that I kind of identify with a little bit of, I guess you would say, a libertarian, which I joked around that libertarians are like engineers. If you ever have dealt with an engineer before, I feel like it's part of your completion of your degree is that you have to find ways to shoehorn that into a conversation. I kind of feel the same way about libertarians, or at least my experience with them before, is that people just usually just found a way to interject that into a conversation. I do believe that we need a little bit less of government telling us what to do and how to do things, and a little bit more of, let's like, we need to get that small town mentality into a broader, spectrum of the country, of that we need to work together. I mean, no political leader is ever going to be the answer to anything if people aren't willing to put aside their differences and kind of work together for a common good. I think that there are some universal things that we could go on, like where I had a very, very great discussion with somebody who I have a relationship with through playing sports. And I've never ever considered him and I'll just leave it as we don't look the same, just kind of go on with that. And generally, we've enjoyed each other's company. I just met the guy last year. It seems like he's a good guy. I think that he thinks the same about me. He had some posts that I thought, he thought were, not, I don't want to say they were divisive, but as I kind of posted out, I'm going to be rambling all over the place here. So try to follow along the best you can. That's why I'm an amateur podcaster trying to get better. This episode is as much for me to kind of examine myself and how I think I don't have this scripted out or anything. I'm just going to be putting it all out there. But I had, I'll be honest, there was the way that people were putting certain things out there did, I want to say, trigger emotions in me. And then some of those responses to what happened on there, I may have written a thing or two. I'll be honest, I deleted a few posts from my Facebook page because at the time it felt good hitting submit on it. And then when I thought more about it, because I had some time to process what I had written and how it was being handled, I ended up deleting them. And the whole point of this I had is I did finally get together, put up a post, which even then I still edited because I believed in the original message of it, but I kind of screwed up myself too, in the sense of that I said that, anyone that thinks uses their emotions to guide their thoughts, they're most likely going to have irrational thoughts. It impedes your ability to think rationally. The brute analogy that I make is somebody that's in an abusive relationship will stay with that person. And it's usually because I love them or he loves me. And it's like, you're misguided in that sense. And maybe that's the worst analogy to possibly use. But guess what? I make mistakes. I had written, one thing that kind of happened is that when people don't like the results of something, they have to obviously pick it apart. One of the big things that I saw from people who were unhappy with the results of the election was that, you can always find some type of statistic or something that will support your narrative. I guess you could say it's both good and bad. I would go on. And the idea that people looked at the idea of that more educated voters, which I say in air quotes if you're listening to this, not watching it, educated voters were kind of in the process of that they were upset that the uneducated voters went one way and the educated voters went another way. And I don't necessarily enjoy the term educated. Educated means that, there's a difference between educated and intelligence. Educated means that you have a high awareness of a certain particular topic or, field of one nature. Intelligence is something completely different than that. Intelligence is just your ability to actually understand things. And really what it was kind of was that, people who went to college tended to go one way, and other people went other ways. And I then put, some of the dumbest people I ever met was in a college campus. Somebody replied back to me about how, calling people dumb is not exactly the greatest thing. Everyone has different circumstances and how they got to where they got to. And they approached it to me in a great tone that, I did not get argumentative with them. They weren't argumentative with me. I realized, oh, you know what? They have a point there. So I immediately edited to say some of the least intelligent people that I know I met were in college campuses. I believe that self-awareness is a form of intelligence. And there is this idea that some people will validate themselves simply by the fact that they have a college degree. I've always kind of been in this weird area where I do have a college degree, but I don't let that define me as an intelligent person. And I kind of look at this now as that I can talk to somebody that has a higher level of education than me and carry myself in that conversation to where they won't look down upon me. At least if they're a reasonable person, they will kind of go, oh, I get that. In discussing people where I guess, I guess I rant and rave like a lunatic, I think that I just wish that people thought logically. And I kind of thought back to some of my experiences in college where, me in college, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't the greatest thinker, we'll just say. I was uh, habitually drinking and smoking marijuana to where I was just kind of living in a cloud, and I was oblivious to certain things around me. But I do now recall that there's a difference between educated and intelligence, but I also look at that educated has been more of an indoctrinated thing. Thinking back on the education I had when I was going up through high school and through college, I feel like that there were people that were telling me what to think. This is the absolute being, where in reality, what education should be is that, hey, this is what's out there. Use your own reasoning and logic or your own critical thinking skills to form what you think is correct. But don't be dismissive of other people's thoughts, and don't pray, don't come as a holier than thou thing. And that's, I'm towing a line here where I'm telling people what I never wanted to tell people what to think. I just kind of wanted to go how to think. It always stood out to me one time where my father, again, somebody who I like to, really thank a lot, is that he taught me how to think, not what to think. And that's always a big George Carlin point of that, don't teach a kid how to read, teach them how to question what they read, ask these questions to yourself. And too many times, I think that on both sides of this, people are guilty of it. People do are very, very quick to engage in confirmation bias, where if they think something and then they see something that aligns with what they think, they don't even really look deeper into it. They just go, okay, yep, that's correct. Guilty of it myself. Everybody is. Nobody's perfect. That's It's a big, thing to go with this. Um, there are, again, like I said, in talking with people, amongst that 80% of people, like anyone that's just going to dismiss you because of the way that you think, you're probably better off without them in your life anyways. And they're probably going to end up in a very, very lonely circle at some point in time. And being constantly around like-minded people, it's not really a great way to go through life, I'll just kind of say. And I have to, I hate going on with this, but that coexist bumper sticker, as cheesy as can be sometimes, it is important. We do have to all live together on this planet, and try and do it in the most peaceful and harmonious way. I'm very, very happy that, everyone thought that one way or the other, the way that the election turned out, we were going to have some kind of carnage on the streets of some form. Uh, Maybe based on past experiences. I mean, we did have, like the parallels between January 6th and what happened in other incidents that we, throughout the country. Both sides acted with emotions and did some pretty dumb shits. We can kind of leave it at that. You can argue for one side or the other if you want to, but I don't want to argue. I want to discuss. That's kind of how I'm putting this out here. Um, I think that there can be some I think that there can be some benefits to what we had here. I mean, again, the election is one thing, nothing has improved, nothing has changed, but I think that we have now opened the doors to getting some positive direction, I would say. I kind of felt that the one particular side that lost kind of was getting a little more absolutist. And I think that the side that won has some tendencies of theirs too. Again, we're going with the 10% and the 10% thing. I think that there's some things that we can kind of just come to an agreement on, of that, let's face it, like where one side seems to be more for law and order, the other side seems to be for lawlessness. We can have a mixture of both. That's kind of what this whole thing's supposed to be about. Now, the fact that we are going to be in a situation where it appears that one side is going to be in complete power, I can understand how that worries people a little bit, but I think it's also because people have been in this, both sides have instilled fear in the others. And I think that's because, it creates that emotion that people get, what gets them to react strongly. I just noticed throughout this entire process that, I've said this before on other episodes and whatnot, so forgive me if I repeat myself. For all I know, this might be the first time you've ever listened to me. This is what you get in the Scho-Zone. I'm just a regular guy who maybe wasn't always the greatest, that's just trying to be better. And hopefully I get better one day at a time, one episode at a time, one rant at a time. Excuse me. I'm just kind of trying to maybe organize somewhat of a cogent thought right now, or somewhat of, idea. But we have to, like, so yeah, back to the law and the order thing. You know, do I think that somebody that robs us, shoplifts from a store should just be able to just slap on the wrist, walk away free? No. But on the other side, and this is something I got from a discussion with somebody else, that person should also not have their life ruined. Now, if it's a repeated pattern of behavior, that's a little bit different. But the one off thing, totally, totally, we need to kind of go, okay, why is that? rather than punish somebody for what they did, let's try to figure out why they did what they did. I can kind of say this in my recovery from being an alcoholic, I guess, or I mean, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I guess I don't know. That's what one school of thought would say, but the idea that why did I become the way that I did? Because I remember when I was in the first initial parts of changing that, somebody was, kind of like, the absolute thing of, where are you going to go? Basically, I'll just leave it more personal. This one, someone was saying, where am I going to go to rehab? And I'm like, I don't want to go to rehab. And they would hear that as that, well, you don't want to get better. And my thinking was that I, I definitely need to stop drinking. I definitely know I needed to quit drinking. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about that one. But why did I drink in the first place was kind of the big deal. And having people have their own ways of doing things, I needed to go because I always had felt like that there was something slightly wrong with me. And my biggest fear was that I would stop drinking and still have these same problems. Was not easy. It was not a, it was a lot of self-improvement, a lot of kind of, being a reclusiveness, or, I would say, where I had to do a lot of inward reflection and kind of think back at how I ended up in the positions that I did. And slowly but surely I kind of gained an understanding of that. And you have to move on from certain things that happen. I mean, it's not like I've asked for forgiveness or I've forgiven forgiveness on certain things, but kind of getting an idea of how you became how you were. I'm really just going all over the place right now. God, fuck. I had, it sounded in my head, these things all sounded so great, which could be the signs of a crazy person, but just really wanted to put something out there because again, I'm not normally a political person, but that was just kind of one thing. I look at is that there was just so much misinformation on both sides, or that people gravitate towards what they do. Again, which people will do is they'll read the headline but they won't read the article. That's very dangerous. You need to examine it from all ends, and I feel like that I'm kind of a well-rounded person. The idea that if I think one thing means I think all of these other things is kind of how our political bi-party or two-party system works, is that you can't, you know you saw these results with certain things on certain states where they're like, this state makes no sense. They're schizophrenic. They voted yes for this, but no for that. And it's like there's different things that are different important. You don't have to all fall in one line. I think that everybody should just be independents. They should just kind of think the way they do. But ultimately, where I like the idea of it's me personally is that it seems like one side wanted to have more governments and another side seemingly wants to have less of it, or they at least they want to reform a little bit of what we have in government. Uh, do I know that's the best? Which one was the best? Based on the information I had at my disposal, I kind of leaned one way more than the other. And, hopefully I'm right. I could be wrong. We'll find out with the next 4 years. I just kind of look at it as that we had enough of a sample of, through my adulthood, of that we've had things where they've been ruled one way and then we've had things where they've been ruled the other. One of them was, I looked at to be a little bit better. I look at the first administration of the guy whose name I will not mention because just saying that name can trigger people into all kinds of weird thoughts. But I don't believe that it was as bad as it was presented. And guess what? Every president is going to do something that you do not like. But in his case, I kind of looked at as that it's just a cliche expression: judge people for their actions, not for their words. I don't believe some of his actions were as bad as people perceive them to be. And I'm not going to say he didn't have some bad actions along the way, but it seems that people would find something that was near and dear to them and then just completely dismiss the other side of it, everything else that they did. I kind of look of that, like, and another expression I go is that nobody is wrong 100% of the time. It's probably more like 60-40, I guess I would go on. And, hopefully things do get a little bit better. This, like, one issue that I care a lot about. So now, again, this is me kind of, I don't want to say talking out of both sides of my mouth, but just examining things. Back to the idea of me getting into recovery. I had said that, when I kind of was rejected, or I rejected the AA program a little bit because they were so absolute about things. They would dismiss anybody that wanted to do anything differently than what they were doing. And as I kind of looked at it, well, it's like you guys have such a high failure rates, or that's a negative way of looking at it, which I need to improve. There is a success rate that they have, but there is also a not successful rate that they had. Personally, myself right now, I have never been a happier, better person to my understanding. As far as that, I have the most self-awareness that I've ever had. I am probably happier than I've ever been. I'm probably healthier than I've ever been. All of these things that have worked for me maybe won't work for somebody else, but I can just say, hey, this is what has worked for me. Like I remember posting about the new diet that I kind of eat, which isn't even really, I kind of even misspoke by saying I was on the carnivore diet. I'm not even on the carnivore diet. Someone says that sounds more like keto. I'm not really on the keto diet. I just kind of more or less adopted the principle of that, hey, eat food that you make yourself and have as few ingredients in it as possible. And we are, as human beings, I mean, again, I was a phys ed major, and there is the idea of that, people don't understand why we care so much about that stuff, but we are body and mind as human beings. And having them both work on the same level, or both working as optimally as possible, I do believe enhances one another. Ever since I have cleaned up the stuff that I eat and the stuff that I put in my body, I have noticed my mind has gotten a lot clearer and a lot sharper. You can even just tell this by, if you were to look back at an episode that I posted a few months ago versus one that I'm posting today, you'd be like, oh shit, what's different about this guy? It's just, trial and error that kind of worked out for me. When I posted some of the things that I was doing, I had people that would reach out to me privately and ask me, what do I do? What do I do? And I would kind of say, hey, this is what I do. I wouldn't say this is what you need to do. There were certain principles that I would kind of say that this would probably work better. And then instantly you get hit with the resistance of why someone can or cannot do that. And it's just, hey, like, listen, as I was saying to people, like, you can do whatever you want to do. I'm just saying that this is what worked for me. That's kind of the way that we need to approach certain things, where I don't even know if I'm even on point right now. This is just kind of ranting and raving. And this is maybe just as much for me as it is for my listeners. But if you can draw a reasonable conclusion out of anything I'm saying or take anything from this, that's just what it's out there for. Again, I've never really wanted to be political, and I'm kind of, avoiding certain topics. But again, I've just kind of felt that people did not have the best understanding. And I've gained some perspective on things, throughout this whole thing. I mean, this whole little journey I've been on as far as starting the Scho-Zone. When I was traveling around from ballpark to ballpark this summer, it wasn't as much about just going to the ballparks. When I visited different cities, I like to see how different people live in different parts of the country, because, you know, this is a big enough country, and this way that the states are and the way that different cities are, even people are somewhat living different lives. But I do believe that there are some universal principles that we could all kind of do, or could kind of enhance our experience on all of this. And yeah, I mean, so again, I wrote some things that you wrote in the idea of emotion and took down. But yeah, back to this idea that, there are people that, because they have a college degree, think that they are smarter than people. Some cases it can be true. I would probably say in many it is not. If you view that some kind of status, if you think that you have more money than somebody, it makes you better than somebody, you're an asshole. If you think because you have a degree and somebody doesn't, you're an asshole. Um, these are just kind of just that's a stance I won't back down from, actually. And probably should be having this more prepared if I wanted to actually be taken more seriously. But I just, again, I'm just a guy that's just trying to do better and trying to help people do better along the way, I guess, through my own thoughts and experiences. But I've, recently started dating a woman who's of a much higher level of education and not even from America. And it's, it's nice to get perspective from her on things. And it's also nice that I believe that she gets some perspective for me on things now, where certain things, again, with the educated and intelligent things, I'm having conversations that I have no extensive background in, other than this is just kind of using my reasoning to go with. I think that education kind of needs to be changed a little bit, in the idea that, we need to, I look at colleges as indoctrination centers. They tell people what to think, not how to think. They give you one side of the story, or not the both sides of the story, and let you draw your own conclusions. And I think we need to get better with that. But people will ultimately kind of gravitate towards what they want to. They'll reject things, without, people just need to be less dismissive of other people, I guess I would say, and start having more conversations with people that are not like you and gain an understanding. Because if I, learn from you and you learn from me, I think we're all better off on that one. Um, I don't know. I just think that we all, it doesn't matter who's running the show if the people can't work together on this one. And I think that we've been working apart. And now that we finally have had this kind of turning point moment, I hope that we can kind of work to get things a little bit better now. Who knows? This thing could all just blow up in my face. But as I've looked at it, is that with I guess I'll kind of relate this back to my occupation. I work in sales. I love nothing more than when someone refers me as a salesperson to work with, What I dislike is when people start doing the selling for me. They start trying to tell them things that I would not say, where I would always say, hey, listen, just get me in the room with this person and I'll take care of it from there. Too many people, I feel like that, they started, and that's why I've, mostly remained neutral. I mean, I have private conversations with people, but too many times I feel like that people are being salespeople for their political candidates, and they're not. How you're not the best salesperson for another person, I guess is the way I would phrase that. And you get these misguided, ideas, and again, memes are meant to be funny once upon a time, but now memes have just turned into the modern day version of propaganda. And there was plenty of memes, and I'm not even going to go into the topics that I saw throughout the whole past 4 years. That it's like, okay, let's, an expression I use all the time: let's not let the truth get in the way of a good meme. Some people that were upset about this election, I don't necessarily know if they know what they were, or they know what they're upset about, but do they really know what they're upset about? Where, well, and this happened on both sides. People would tell you one thing and they just kind of give you the most extreme viewpoint of it without actually examining what happened. I guess I'll just do this one. For the issue of abortion, there was this idea that it was going to be a federal ban was going to be put on it, when one, the side that won was saying, no, we don't want a federal ban on this. We just want left to, to be left up to the states. That was the whole initial premise of that one. For some people to believe that, and seeing people's reactions, which, I'll be the first to admit I got entertainment out of it for all the wrong reasons. But again, I need to be more compassionate in going that, hey, that person is not, that person maybe isn't necessarily not intelligent. They're just misguided. And if you could try to approach them in the best way to kind of tell them maybe not why they were wrong, but what they need to also consider, I guess, be a little more soft and delicate with things, I guess, is kind of going on. Where if it makes me sound like a big giant pussy, well, guess what? I'm getting too old to start to keep fighting every day. It's a miserable way to go through life. I should kind of go on. So these were just some thoughts and ramblings I need to get out there. This will probably be one of my least popular episodes because I'm kind of stepping out of my realm of that. I really don't like to be a political guy, but every now and again, I feel like there may have been some decent thoughts on there. And this was mostly just kind of getting the conversation that's been going on in my head for the last 24 to 36 hours onto some type of a forum for people to see. So take what you will from it. And if you want to message me, I got my, oh, Jesus, I never even put up my banner, this whole thing here. I've got here, you can reach out to me at the Scho-Zone podcast. You can reach out to me at X on Scho525, on IG at Scho525. Now, I will say my X or Twitter is probably not the best representation of myself, and I should probably work on that. Maybe I will take down some things that I did, because, again, that was mostly something I was reacting out of emotion with in the moment, whereas that's out there for people that don't know me to see, and that's the version I'm putting myself out there, so maybe that's not the best. Whereas on Facebook, that's people that I'm actually friends with that are seeing that. I did, kind of change my ways a little bit. So I'm learning something for myself just by talking this out loud, knowing that there are going to be people that do not know me that will think about this one. But yeah, let's just try and do better, everybody, on both ends of this one. Let's work together. Let's get this idea of, and I hate saying it, but let's not make America great again. Let's just make America great. Because again, as somebody who is now seeing somebody who is not from here, they think this is a great place. They just got to tune out the noise of it. So kept this one to under a half an hour. And I think that, when I watch this one back, I'm certainly going to have that, oh, I should have said this instead of that, or I wish I had done more of this and more of that. But guess what? It's a learning experience. We all need to learn from yourself, learn from each other. Let's do this thing, America. Right. And then would it be a classic? Would it be a Scho-Zone episode if I didn't end this thing like an idiot? But yes, you can also, if you watch this, you can check this out on Spotify, iTunes, or not iTunes, Apple Podcasts. I'm on almost every podcast format. I don't get tons of downloads. I'd like to improve upon that, obviously. But you can, whichever one you go through, you can go to that. If you are listening to this as opposed to watching this, you can always check out the YouTube channel at the Scho-Zone. And yeah, like I said, let's do this thing together. And hopefully in a few years, we're all just having a good laugh, and we're in a much better place than we started off with. Because let's face it, the last 4 years have, depending on where you are, they have not been the best time to be around here. We have grown further apart, whether it was by design or whether it's just by our own errors in our ways. It is what it is. So I will try to end this right now, and see you next time.